If you have an economy that's run on debt, prices are elevated, disposable incomes are low, and goods cannot be sold properly, commerce has one golden opportunity. If it can't sell its products within the economy around it, the automatic answer is to seek a wider customer base. Send them abroad. See if we can sell them in France. Firms in France, already struggling to sell their goods there, are invaded. What do? Well, let's send them across to Britain and see if we can sell ours there. You have, by funding an economy on debt, you create a pressure to export on all economies. And instead of trade for mutual benefit or trade in marginal surpluses, you have every single economy in the world attempting to export its unsaleable surpluses to each other. Now, everybody argues about whether we should have free trade or not. Free trade in the sense of the unhindered exchange of goods and services between two countries or two people that want to exchange, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they're forcing the goods down each other's throats, if there is a pressure within each economy to export and flood other economies with unsaleable surpluses, then free trade is a recipe for disaster. Why do you think protectionist barriers were erected in the first place? It was to try and control the aggressive export drive, whether it was at the national level with government subsidising or whether it was at the commercial level with individual firms trying to seek a wider customer base. You cannot have free trade while you have these aggressive dynamo economies all trying to seek a surplus of exports. If a country's in debt, how can it pay off its debt? It's got to earn. And the only way a country can earn is to export more than it imports. So the debt-based economy works right through from the level of your wage dependence, your lack of income, the goods you can buy, the quality of goods you can buy, who you work for, whether you work for a whopping great firm that doesn't give a monkeys about you, or whether you work for a local firm that's prepared to care for you. It has an impact on all of these issues, right through to trade. The aggression between nations has regularly been responsible for international warfare. Monetary reform is a very, very simple idea. It is simply that a nation has a right and a responsibility to provide the economy and its population with a neutral medium of exchange. Not one generated out of debt by banks, building societies or other lending institutions, but one literally supplied. This is one of the great and glorious, if you can call it that, misnomers of economics. If you look at the official statistics and read the newspapers, they talk about the money supply. Well, there isn't a money supply, and that's the whole problem. This money is not supplied. This bulk of money, this 96% of credit, is an incident of lending. You might be interested to know how it happens. Again, I have an attractive acetate with some cartoon figures on it, but I can't show it, so you'll just have to imagine it. But if someone on the front row down here crashes his car and needs a new one, he'll go to the bank manager, and the bank manager will advance him a loan of, say, $25,000. He will take his $25,000 and he'll go trotting off down the lane to where there is a garage or car sales. He will then buy the car he wants, and the car salesman will hold that piece of paper, $25,000 in credit. The car salesman will then go to his bank, will pay it in, and the bank manager will say, "Ah, new money." It will be deposited in his account, and the entire money stock is $25,000 larger. The receiving bank has no way of knowing that that was money that was loaned, and nothing was taken away from anybody else's account in the first place. It was new credit, borrowed, spent, redeposited, money supply grows, and the banks say, that was nice, now we can lend some more. And they do, and it goes on and on and on. With every step, debt and the money stock go up in parallel. Just a delightful, this is well known by economists, delightful understatement by one economist. Taking the banking system as a whole, this is a chap called Andrew Crockett, established economist in the UK. Taking the banking system as a whole, the act of lending creates, as a direct consequence, deposits exactly equal to the amount of lending undertaken. Provided, therefore, banks all move forward in step, there appears to be no limit to the bank money they can create. He then scratches his head somewhat. Even more than this, there would appear to be a basic instability in the banking system. But it is much more than instability. It introduces a series of pernicious growth distortions into the economy that affect all of your lives. In the 1930s, they talked about a leisure economy. And they came up with some many interesting and creative ideas for welfare reform. This was pre the dole. Their idea was for a basic income. A basic income. Mortgage debt was sort of non-existent in those days, or very low. Mortgages were for perhaps 8 years, and they were often, well, they were for 25 years, but they were often paid off in advance of maturity and averaged 8 years. Astonishing. Can you imagine that? They didn't see a lifetime's servitude to a mortgage as a norm. You've drifted into the position that they fought against. They were talking about job sharing, basic income, job rotation. They had an acute depression with surplus food everywhere. By then, the economy was, the UK economy was deemed to be wealthy, obviously nowhere near the amount of material goods that we have now. But even then, they realised that at each stage of advance, whenever a machine is invented, whenever a new technology lays off squadrons of people, there should be a choice. Do we want to go on? You know, what do we do next? Or do we just plough everybody back into full employment? And that's why the acceptance of employmentism, I know it's one of the great automatic choices of modern economics, but it wasn't, and it shouldn't be. And we need a structure that allows us to diffuse full employment, because otherwise we'll employ ourselves till we've carved our own grave on the surface of this planet, because the planet can't take full employment. Now, if you take the waste of time that is involved in marketing, the waste of time that is involved in making goods so that they fall apart, the waste of time that's involved in over-centralization with having goods produced in Taiwan that could be produced perfectly well in Canada, and carting them and trucking them backwards and forwards across the globe. The waste of time involved in redesigning products constantly, year on year on year. Do we need full employment? We have to think of structures, and monetary reform embraces that just as much as it embraces the supply of money by government.